This video, we're continuing the discussion on stabilizing the shoulder, more along the lines of the shoulder blade back here, but first, the disclaimer. Mike Matthews, physical therapist here with the PT411. Thanks for joining me. If you already haven't done so, make sure to check me out on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Subscribe, turn on notifications. Also, make sure to check me out on the PT411.com. So last week we talked about why it's important to promote shoulder stability. We looked closely at exercising the muscles that directly affect the ball and socket joint here. If you haven't seen that video, make sure to check that one out first. This video, we're looking at stabilizing the stabilization exercises for the shoulder blade there. Now the scapula forms a joint with the arm, the humerus, this ball and socket joint that gets dislocated that we've been talking about lately. Now the scapula also forms a joint with the collarbone here, acts as a strut to the rest of the body, the midline of the body here. It also forms a joint with the thoracic region. The rib cage back there articulates with it. It moves up and down. It can move side to side. It can tilt in a whole bunch of different directions as well. Now this creates many degrees of freedom of movement. For the arm, really frees it up to work more. We need to work all these muscles, work on the control and the strength of this to keep the shoulder nice and healthy. We need to work on communication, keep it, like I said, just nice and controlled. Now we can keep this nice and stable here, adds another layer of protection against shoulder dislocations, whether we're trying to prevent them or avoid re-injuries. The first muscle that we're looking at is the muscle that's kind of tricky for people to contract. It's responsible for holding the shoulder blade up against the rib cage. It prevents it from winging too much. Now this one is called the serratus anterior. To activate it, you need to back up to a table. We're looking for something about the height of my hand resting down at my side. I'm going to turn my palm facing backwards, press back into it. As I'm doing that, I'm focusing on sticking my chest out and scooping my scapula forward like this. Now it can take some time and quite a bit of practice before it really clicks. It's just like everything else. Eventually it just kind of comes together. Once we can do this easily, we take away the pressing against the counter. We work the same movement there. As we get comfortable with that, we start elevating the arm. We try to do this in several different positions. As that gets easier, holding it in positions, we try to actively move the arm and holding it up against there. We start off with simple base motions like flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, horizontal abduction and adduction, elevation from neutral, elevation from overhead, and we have our external and internal rotation down at our side and out into abduction. And we can even work into more complicated movements, progressing into more complicated directions, combining directions like diagonals with our rotations, throwing motions, shooting motions, and so on. We can also add resistance to each of those exercises as they get easier to add another layer of challenge. Now eventually the goal is to have that muscle just activating on its own as we move that shoulder and arm around. It will already fire some on its own, but learning to isolate that movement and becoming more aware of it as we move the arm through space, we can add quite a bit of stability to our motion. We also have our pectoralis minor muscle. This muscle attaches to the ribs and the shoulder blade, pretty similar to the serratus anterior. To work this, we need to allow the shoulder complex to completely protract forward during punching and pressing activities. So while we're working these pressing movements, we need to make sure that we're progressing, that we're protruding that shoulder blade all the way forward, letting that entire shoulder complex come forward as far as we can at the end range movement there. We have our classic bench press. We can work into more of an incline or decline angle as well. Just make sure that we're really protruding our shoulders forward at the end of those presses to really get that muscle activated. Now we also have our traps and our rhomboids. Now there's a debate on isolating these independent from each other. I'm not going to get into that here because they essentially do the same thing, drawing those shoulder blades together and elevating or depressing them a little bit as well. Now to start, we need to work on our Y's and T's. We need to lie face down, thumbs facing upwards, Raise those arms up while they're out to the side in that T position there. Focus on squeezing the shoulder blades together. We're holding this 5 to 10 seconds for 10 to 20 reps at a time. And our Y's here, arms up in, you guessed it, a Y position. Same thing, raising the arms with the thumbs up, bringing the shoulder blades together, and this time trying to depress them down a little bit as well. 5 to 10 seconds at a time, 10 to 20 reps each time we do that. Now we can also work these muscles in a combination of different types of rows. We can work more suspended rows like this right here. We can work bent over rows right here. We can work it with bands or machines as well. We can work these also in a more of a leaning forward angle or a leaning backwards angle as well. Now we also have the upper traps. We can work with shrugs. We can do these with weights, and we can do these with bands. We can be completely upright doing those like we just showed you, or slightly bent forward like this. Now we're working these with higher reps, lower resistance with all these exercises if we're rehabbing after a shoulder dislocation, and only when it's safe to do so after our physician releases us to do that. We're doing 10 to 15 reps at 3 to 4 sets. Once we get more comfortable with this, as we increase the resistance, we start going to failure within the range of 7 to 12 reps, still 3 to 4 sets. These can also be implemented on our training days, on days that we're doing upper body or shoulders, whatever our split is, transitioning into doing those on those couple of days a week that we're working those muscles. Now we'll stop here for this week. Next week, we're going to work on advancing shoulder stabilization exercises further. We're going to bring it all together and really keep things challenged, so make sure to stay tuned. Again, I'm Mike Matthews, physical therapist here with the PT411. Thanks for joining me.